Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Outbound Podcast. I'm Perseus. I'm joined by Sage Zero, and we're looking at uh, StormBreaker, which was released with Alpha 4.2 in Star Citizen. They released a little trailer for it and a whole page. Nice little spot. Um, our org took a look at it with the first time was with one of our allied orgs, and then we went back for another attempt. I don't know. What's your general thoughts on it?
I like what they're cooking. I think they have a good idea as to the kind of scope that they want to build with this. But just coming from games that are, similar in vein, have tried the similar things. There's definitely a lot to be desired as far as like mechanically how they kind of set it up. Um, I think aesthetically they nailed it. Like going out there through the storm and getting on the shuttle station and riding in there, and this facility just being like this, complete, completely different environment than what you've experienced before in the game. It's definitely immersive and you feel it, and they did a good job in the design. Um, my main complaint comes to kind of how they formatted the mechanics in there with the fact that it's kind of a competitive event, right? You're up against other teams and stuff, and they made some kind of questionable decisions in there as far as like how the spawns work and stuff. Especially
And
Perseus and I coming from a Planet Side 2 background and having a very, very in-depth understanding of spawn systems, especially in facilities and stuff like this, when in a competitive environment, and kind of what it means in reality when you set things up a certain way. And we got a pretty good dose of that when we were trying to get this thing knocked out. The last couple attempts we did. It was good fun though. I really like the different stages in the event. I like the holdout when you're trying to get the egg and all the security comes tearing through the doors and you're just holding down this room and stuff. Dealing with the radiation is interesting. It was definitely a new mechanic and had to deal with things in new and interesting ways. So that was fun. Um, the key cards took a little bit to figure out, and kind of what Perseus has alluded to a few times just with the AI. Sometimes, like in these events, when there's a lot of stuff going on and the server's chugging a little bit, the AI tends to teleport around a little bit, which kind of breaks the immersion a little bit and can create situations where like people will die when they shouldn't because you've got an NPC that's like shooting through walls or teleporting around or is desynced from where they're standing, and it can make these things a little unfair. Surprisingly, on this first run, we didn't really have any problems like that. The second and third run, not so much. We definitely had some issues like that going in. Um, so I mean,
I
the
will say that this section. I'm playing your POV is that we did was great.
was a lot of fun. Honestly, I enjoyed this part. The raiding the base was so much fun.
Yeah, I think this was the most successful part of it. Getting the egg. The more annoying part of it was
Uh,
honestly the open. I guess you want to say the open world of doing the worm and just other people just coming in.
well, this
They're doing
first
these systems, but they have. I mean, they're still saying they're going to do FPS scanning and radars, and
that's got to get in the game
they're doing
soon if they're gonna
content
do this kind of stuff.
without these systems.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, on our first run here, the worm didn't actually spawn when we put the egg in. We had success both the second time, both the two times we did after this, but we actually kind of got screwed. It really
Yeah.
sucked. We ended up coming back, and then this run we did, we actually got the spawn. So um, this is our second attempt actually that was recorded. Our first attempt we did everything and we got no worm, and then our third attempt we got really close. We were fighting the worm and got to the very end, and then we got ganked by a group that came in behind us. And then our fourth attempt, we did really good. I actually killed the worm at the end, but
Mhm.
we figured some stuff out with the spawn mechanics inside the facility that give me a lot of pause in their design choices, and um,
Yeah.
it comes down to like what we've experienced in PlanetSide. So you've got three buildings in the back there that have med beds that you can set your spawn to, and that you can spawn indefinitely, right? So that means that the
Yeah.
one person slips through on the shuttle, or even if they, something that I've been doing recently is that you sneak in there and then you set your spawn in one of those beds, and then you just grief anybody that happens to come in here who's doing it. You can steal stuff, you can loot stuff, you can kill them while they're doing the event, and you can just respawn back at one of those beds with another magazine and be ready to go again. And to
Right.
me,
So
like,
it's just ridiculous.
yeah, like I
If
get,
you if to keep the planet side analogy going is the enemy spawn room will expire. It doesn't last forever. Um, and when I say enemy, it's basically anyone other than your group.
right.
Um, you don't just get to pop in whenever for forever with all your weapons and ammo because we've got tier one, or was it? Are we in tier one or tier zero? Um,
Tier 0.
Inventory retaining. Um, you know, this event is it's not thought through where for med resources you're supposed to eventually um that's supposed to be a resource. You can't just spawn forever in this content. You can, the inventory, you're not supposed to be able to have endless ammo based on whatever you had on your body, uh and then FPS scanning and like stealth abilities, that's not in either. Like we're doing these massive open world FPS type gameplays with them anyway, and what is it really offering the player? It's just like it's an experience that's not
It's not
what the
complete.
game is
It's not a
supposed to be.
complete experience.
Um,
Yeah. And it's
yeah,
because it's missing certain parts of like the mechanics that are supposed to be there, right?
yeah,
Um, a way to fix it that I think it makes the most logical sense is that they've either got to do what a lot of these other games do, is create a ticket system and an objective in here that requires you to dedicate people to hold a specific area to be able to continue to spawn there. And that way it creates a contested zone and people are focused on the PvP there to be able to maintain control of the zone, which allows you to fight the worms safely. The way it is right now, all it takes is one or two people to sneak in, or somebody who happen to just log off with their imprint there, and they can just backspace back into one of those spawn rooms from anywhere inside of Pyro. Hell, I did it from
yeah,
Stanton. I was at Orison
yeah.
and backspaced my way back to the Lazarus 2 facility last week, and you can
Yeah.
just keep doing that, and that's
And
not
you just bring
cool.
your full armor and inventory based off the
Yeah,
respawn
yeah, that's
mechanic.
severely broken. I get that it's like a holdover just to be able to make it work, but they've got to be thinking about this stuff long term, because if this is the attitude they go at with designing these things in the future, it doesn't look good. And I hate to say
No,
that.
it really doesn't. What I think needed to happen with this is, regardless of all those things that we've discussed already, is at some point you need to transition, I think, to an instance like the first base. Maybe that's where enemy players can come in, um, and I don't know, trip you up.
Try.
But once I feel like once you get the egg, once you've planted, somehow that became an instance, and you and your party do this content and have an opportunity to get out, or they need to have all these other systems thought out a lot better. But I feel like if you just get stabbed in the back because you don't have an org. I mean, let's face it, we had a pretty big group. I don't see how anyone with like a 3-person group, unless one other person's going to screw that entire effort that they spend hours trying to get set up for potentially. Um, I don't see how a solo experience. How is this soloable or even small group capable? Um, this is a large org content, and
It
that's
it
not the basis Star Citizen right now.
Yeah, it's not soloable in the sense that like you could do the event soloable. It is soloable in the sense that you could sneak in there and steal stuff. And
Yeah,
that's
but
more due to like the way that the spawns are in there right now. And I think
what I mean is one person. If you're solo
yeah,
and one other person decides to grief you for potentially hours on end because they can just respawn for however long they want to,
yeah, it's
you're
not
screwed.
balanced. Yeah, you're
There's
screwed.
there's nothing you can do. Um, and that's not what I want to see. I don't want to see that kind of content. Which is a shame. Because I mean, the animations, the actual, I feel like the event itself, like the progress. You have the first building, you get the egg, you do all this other stuff, and then you kill this thing. Um, I mean, it's good progress in terms of
Creating
like
content that's
you
engaging
know
and
this
interesting,
this
but
is basically a
yeah,
raid, right?
yeah, more
Or
or less, yeah. First raid or dungeon.
um, and I like this. I want to have more of it, but it's got to be more thought out. And they're doing this stuff, and it makes me this is an effect of having the crowdfunded game where they want to put out this stuff because they want to show we're working on it basically. But in an ordinary game, you would never, this kind of thing doesn't happen because it's just behind closed doors for more years, and they've got all these other systems that are refined. um and they're supposed to be doing that, but and we've got this kind of half-baked kind of experience.
In a
The
way,
game
though,
too,
I see
not
this as
that.
an experiment. This was their first attempt to kind of create this sort of semi-instance content. And I say semi-instance because it is, because there's multiple Lazarus facilities on each planet. There's two or three Lazarus facilities. Each one of them has 3 satellite bases, and each satellite base goes into the same instance of the three that are around it. So it's kind of instance in that sense, and that the outside can't affect the inside when you're in the facility, or it's supposed to be that way. The main issue is that other than the spawning thing right now, is that people have been like soft deathing their ships into the storm and just landing them in the middle of the area there, and using the spawn systems from things like Ursas and stuff that are still active once the ship or vehicle is like soft death, and using that for spawns and stuff too. And that's the kind of stuff, like, if
Yeah,
you're
they
not
didn't
gonna
game at
fully
all.
instance it, then you've got to find some way to like prevent people from abusing the mechanics in that kind of way, similar to like the abusing the spawn mechanics in the way that the beds are set up right now, right? And that's the thing with designing one of these events, is that you've got to have enough people playing, and you've got to play it yourself and put your brain in the size of, in the shoes of, what's the worst somebody can do with the way that this is set up, because people will look at these mechanics and find the most efficient way that they can bullshit their way through getting what they want out of it. And that's just kind of, you got to make sure it's airtight, and that just comes to good content design. Really, you've got to either test it a lot behind closed doors, or what you do put into the game, you've got to be ready to start changing stuff immediately once you launch it. You start realizing it's not playing out how you expected it to. So I was hoping with the 4.3 we'd see some more iterations on this content, just fixes and some changes. We'll see if they get to that point. It seems like 4.1 or 4.2.1 is going to be a pretty big patch, and they're still squeezing stuff into it, and they're putting a lot more of this type of content in with 4.3. So we'll see where they get with that one. Honestly, um, they definitely have the right idea. I think it's just the execution is not great, and I really hope they look at some of the other projects and stuff that have gone on similar to this, and how they handle instancing and stuff in like an open world game like this, because there's a lot of good examples out there on how to do this kind of stuff, from base design standpoints to spawn systems. You could just look around and find some good instances out there of people that have handled this in creative ways that keep things relatively fair. And that's what we're all hoping
Yeah.
for.
And see, here's the thing: is like if you're looking at this, you have no choice but to beat people up and kill them because
Oh
they don't
yeah.
have
Not a little aside
it's
there. That was the
the
guy that
social.
snuck into our instance, who I point blanked with the freaking railgun after I knocked him out.
Yeah, it's I would love to have better social systems where we can be like, join us, or they're flagged as bad. Do they have bad rep? But do they have good rep? They're not a murder hobo, but you don't know, so you have to kill them because you're just going to get shot in the back if you don't. Um,
Yeah, there definitely needs to be that social layer's got to get put in ASAP if they're going to keep doing these open world events.
yeah.
When
Um,
we originally approached this, how I would have approached it if we were organizing something in our planet side game, with the understanding that we were going to go into a combat situation. And the way that we organized our squad was that we were trying to make sure that we maintained control of the outside facilities and stuff. and making sure that we had a way to get the loot out and that kind of stuff, because it all goes down the cargo elevator, and you're supposed to be able to take it up outside and put it in your ship to get it out of here. Um, but all of that's kind of moot with the way that the spawn system is right now. And what they've got to do is stop cutting themselves off at the knees with these kind of like half-assed ways of doing things. Because, you know, if you're going to make somebody go through all the effort of trying to fight to get into the facility and then control the outside and then give them a way to spawn on the inside, then it's got to be, you've got to allow them to completely control the inside. So that includes the spawns and not letting other people set spawns in here, that kind of stuff, right? So,
They're almost there, but
yeah,
I feel like they need to do this instance where at some point you just do this content and then leave with your loot.
I,
They want to have this completely unrestricted kind of thing, maybe. I mean, they seem to have done that with the rest of Pyro, where it's open world all the time, and the intention really is to have these shards have even more people on them. It's going to
yeah.
be freaking bustling. It's going to be busy, and
Now,
it's just going to be even more combat all the time at what at the what they're doing. And I don't, I'm that is very far from what I think the majority of players want. I think there's polls on there that are upwards of 70% of people,
yeah.
are not interested in that kind of shoot 'em,
See,
at all times type of environment.
I'm not against it. It's just got to be structured the right way. Um,
Yeah.
so I used to play Warhammer Online: Age of Reckoning, and for anybody who's also played Dark Age of Camelot, there used to be dungeons in those games where they were PvPvE dungeons, and how it worked was like when your faction controlled a certain area, or you or the owner of that certain area, you got access to this dungeon. But if the territory ownership swapped hands while you're in the dungeons, it gave the other players a chance to invade and basically fight you in the dungeon. And I think something like that could be useful in this, where it's like an instance. You go into the instance, it's yours, you've got control of it, but there's some kind of external factor where somebody can invade it if they meet certain requirements or take over something on the outside. And there's a little bit of a warning, and you can set up to defend it from the inside, and there's a chance. But it's not done in this way where it's just like infinite spawns coming out of one part of the base, and you just kind of, you know, you literally, to do this safely, have to have somebody camping all three of those airlocks, hoping some guy doesn't log on in the middle of nowhere and walk out of one of there and start shooting your people. And then you've got to have somebody watching the shuttle and making sure nobody sneaks off of the shuttle and gets in there and sets their spawn, which is a lot.
They'll do
It's a
better.
lot to
They'll
ask
do
for.
better. What just happened in this clip? Oh,
I
um,
Yeah, I got on the ICT and they got freaking domed by that dude.
oh, of course, yeah, because they just pop out of any angle, anywhere,
Yeah,
from any of the three things, and the gameplay should not be I got to have three folks camp out on these spawn camps, just looking at an empty bed, and that's going to be your gameplay for the next, I don't know, 30 minutes more potentially. That's not
yeah.
engaging.
It's not a good
That's
way to
just the
handle it.
wrong. That's
Yeah.
the wrong way to do it. Um. Anyway, um. Overall, I mean, they'll work on it, but it's I'm not logging in to do I'm not telling anyone log in to experience it. You can probably experience it just by watching our videos. Some of
It's
the
definitely cool though. Like I said, I think their art team, and with like just from the music and the aesthetic and like the design of the whole thing, they're on fire. Like honestly, they cooked. They cooked with this. It was good. Just from a
yeah,
mechanic standpoint, they've got to go on through there and make sure it's right before they put it in the game. And that's the thing, is that, you know, yeah, it's no fun when you've got the shiny new content. You can go in there and people understand certain mechanics and others don't about it, that they can sit there and just grief people inside of it and not give them a fighting chance. And that's kind of like,
exactly.
you got to be careful with that, especially when you implement something like this in, and the game itself is very starved for content as is, and there's going to be a lot of people venturing in there having a bad experience because you designed this in a poor way.
Yeah, I agree. Otherwise, I'll give if you've got comments on thoughts on the Stormbreaker. If you managed to kill it, how did it go? Let us know. Your thoughts on it. You just heard ours. Um, Otherwise, we'll catch you next time on Outbound.
Thanks for watching, everybody.